Sergeant Candejo stood at his post in the medical wing of Station Harmony, watching the endless stream of alien diplomats pass through the gleaming corridors. He had been assigned to this position for 3 months now, and he still found himself amazed by the diversity of life that walked these halls every single day. The station served as neutral ground for the Galactic Assembly, a place where dozens of species gathered to negotiate treaties and resolve disputes. Humans had only recently been granted observer status, which meant they could watch but not vote, listen but not speak unless spoken to first. Deho did not mind his role as a security officer. It gave him time to observe and learn. And he had always been a patient man who understood that respect had to be earned through actions, rather than demanded through words. Today, the medical wing buzzed with unusual tension, and Deho noticed that his alien colleagues seemed nervous in ways he had never witnessed before. The Velisari royal family arrives within the hour, his supervisor informed him through his earpiece. You are to remain at your post, and under no circumstances are you to approach or interact with any member of the royal delegation. Deho acknowledged the order and straightened his uniform. He had heard of the Velisari before, an ancient species known for their advanced technology and strict social hierarchies that separated royalty from common citizens with absolute rigidity. The Velisari believed that their royal bloodline carried divine essence, and physical contact between royalty and commoners was considered the gravest possible offense. Even looking directly at a royal family member without permission could result in severe punishment according to their laws. When the delegation finally arrived, Deho understood why everyone seemed so anxious. The Velisari were tall and elegant, with luminescent skin that shifted colors like living opals, and they moved with a grace that made other species look clumsy by comparison. At the center of the group walked Queen Valthrus herself, her expression carved from ice and her eyes scanning everything with cold authority. Beside her floated a medical platform that carried a young female Velisari, whose skin had faded to a dull gray instead of the vibrant colors displayed by her kin Princess Saleth. Deho realized he had read briefings about her condition, a degenerative cellular disease that had baffled physicians across the galaxy for decades. The princess looked fragile and small against the gleaming platform, and despite the warnings about avoiding eye contact, Deho felt a surge of sympathy for her. She could not be more than the equivalent of 20 human years, yet she seemed to be fading away like a candle running out of wax. The delegation swept past his position without acknowledging his existence, which suited Deho perfectly fine. He preferred to remain invisible in situations like this, where one wrong move could create diplomatic disasters that would take years to repair hours. Passed as the medical teams consulted with the royal physicians, and Deho maintained his post with the discipline that had earned him commendations throughout his military career. He watched staff members rush back and forth with grave expressions, and he overheard whispered conversations about failed treatments and diminishing hope near the end of his shift. Something unexpected happened. Princess Saleth emerged from the examination room without her medical platform, walking slowly on her own legs while her attendants hovered nearby with obvious concern. The queen had insisted on demonstrating that her daughter still possessed strength, a political performance meant to project confidence to watching diplomats. Deho saw the moment it went wrong. The princess stumbled, her legs giving out beneath her as her attendants reached too slowly to catch her falling body. Instinct overrode every warning he had received. He lunged forward and caught the princess before she hit the hard floor, his arms wrapping around her slight frame as her head came to rest against his chest. For a brief moment, everything seemed frozen in time, and Deho felt the faint flutter of her heartbeat against his hands. Then, chaos erupted around him. Royal guards seized him with crushing force, throwing him to the ground while pressing weapons against his skull. The queen screamed orders in her native language, And Deho heard the word that needed no translation execution. "I am sorry," Deho said calmly, even as his face pressed against the cold floor. She was falling, and I could not watch her hit the ground. The queen approached him with murder in her eyes, but then she stopped. Her gaze had shifted to her daughter, who remained on the floor where she had been carefully placed. Something impossible was happening to Princess Selith, where Deho's hands had touched her skin. Color was returning. Faint traces of luminescence pulsed beneath her gray complexion, spreading outward from the points of contact like ripples across still water. The royal physicians rushed forward with scanning equipment, their voices rising in confusion and disbelief as they examined the readings that their instruments displayed. "Her cellular degeneration has slowed," one of them announced with obvious shock. "No, it has reversed in these specific areas. The tissue is regenerating at a rate we have never observed before." Queen Valtherus stared at her daughter, then at the human pinned beneath the boots of her guards. Her expression shifted from rage to something far more complex, a mixture of hope and confusion and calculation that Deho recognized all too well. "What did you do to my daughter?" the queen demanded, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk. Deho had no answer to give her, because he genuinely did not understand what had happened or why the simple act of catching a falling girl had produced such an extraordinary result. He only knew that his life now hung by the thinnest possible thread, suspended between miracle and catastrophe. The cell they placed Deho in was small and cold, with walls that hummed with energy fields designed to contain far more dangerous prisoners than a simple human security officer. He sat on the metal bench and waited, knowing that his fate was being decided somewhere above him by beings who considered his entire species barely worth noticing. 3 days passed in isolation, and Deho spent the time meditating and exercising in the limited space available. He had survived worse situations during his military service on Earth, and he refused to let fear consume him when fear would accomplish nothing useful on the 4th day. The door opened and 2 Velisari guards escorted him to a chamber filled with scientists from at least a dozen different species. They examined him like a specimen, running scanners over every inch of his body while speaking in technical terms that his translator struggled to process. Human appears completely ordinary by the standards of his species, one researcher announced with evident disappointment. There is nothing unusual about his genetic structure or his biological functions. Then explain how he healed the princess, Queen Valtherus demanded from her elevated throne at the far end of the chamber. Explain how this primitive creature accomplished what our greatest physicians could not achieve in 20 years of trying. The lead scientist, a being that resembled a floating collection of crystalline structures, projected a holographic display showing cellular scans. Deho recognized the outline of Velisari tissue, though the details meant nothing to him. "We have analyzed the princess extensively since the incident," the scientist explained. "The areas where the human made physical contact show complete cellular regeneration. The disease has been entirely eliminated from those specific tissues." Murmurs spread through the assembled observers, and Deho noticed that many of them were looking at him with new interest. He was no longer just a criminal who had violated sacred law, but had become a puzzle that demanded solving. "Our investigation has revealed something remarkable about human biology," the scientist continued. "Humans evolved on what we classify as a Category 5 death world, an environment so hostile that most sentient species could not survive there for more than a few hours." The holographic display shifted to show images of Earth, focusing on radiation levels, pathogen diversity, and environmental hazards that Deho had always considered normal. Seeing his homeworld described as a death trap was strangely amusing to him. To survive such conditions, humans developed extraordinary healing mechanisms at the cellular level. Their bodies constantly repair damage from radiation, fight off countless pathogens, and regenerate tissue at rates far exceeding most galactic species. We already knew humans were resilient. The Queen interrupted impatiently. That does not explain how this one healed my daughter. The scientist pulsed with colors that Deho interpreted as nervous hesitation before continuing. Human skin produces a complex mixture of compounds, microorganisms, and bioelectric signatures that appear to have healing properties for other species. When the human touched Princess Salith, these properties transferred to her damaged cells and initiated a regeneration process that her own body could not achieve independently. Silence filled the chamber as the implication sank into every observer present. "You are telling me," the Queen said slowly, "that humans can heal other species simply by touching them. Not all humans and not all conditions," the scientist clarified. "But yes, human touch appears to possess therapeutic properties that we have never encountered before in any other species. The compounds in human sweat, the bacteria on human skin, and the bioelectric field generated by human nervous systems create a combination that can trigger cellular regeneration in compatible species." Deho listened to this explanation with growing amazement. He had never considered his ordinary human biology to be anything special. Yet here were the greatest scientific minds in the galaxy, describing him like some sort of miracle. "The princess requires extended treatment to achieve full recovery," the scientist concluded. "Brief contact initiated the healing process, but prolonged exposure to human touch would be necessary to completely eliminate her disease." Queen Valtherus rose from her throne and descended the steps toward Deho with deliberate grace. Her guards tensed but did not intervene as she stopped directly before him, close enough that he could see the complex emotions warring behind her composed expression. "You violated our most sacred law," she said quietly. "By rights, I should have you executed in the most painful manner our traditions allow." Deho met her gaze without flinching. "I understand, Your Majesty. I do not regret my actions, because watching someone fall when I could catch them goes against everything I believe." Something flickered in the Queen's eyes, respect perhaps? Or maybe just curiosity about this strange creature, who showed no fear even when facing death. "My daughter is dying," the Queen continued. "She has been dying slowly for 20 years while I watched helplessly, unable to save her despite commanding the resources of an entire empire. Now I am told that you, a primitive human, possess the ability to heal her completely." She paused, and Deho saw the mask of royal composure crack just slightly. "I am asking you to save my daughter's life," Queen Valtherus said, a voice dropping to barely more than a whisper. "I am asking this as a mother, not as a queen. Will you help her, even though my people have treated you as a criminal deserving death?" Deho considered the question for only a moment before answering. "Take me to her," he said simply. "I will do whatever I can." The Queen nodded once, and Deho saw tears forming in her ancient eyes before she turned away to hide them from her court. The royal medical suite had been transformed into something resembling a comfortable living space, with soft lighting and gentle music playing from hidden speakers. Deho understood that these accommodations were meant for the princess rather than for him, but he appreciated them nonetheless. Princess Salith lay on a large bed surrounded by monitoring equipment, her gray skin making her look more like a statue than a living being. When Deho entered the room, her eyes opened and fixed upon him with undisguised hostility. "So you are the primitive who dared to touch me," she said, her voice weak but sharp with contempt. "My mother tells me I should be grateful, but I find it difficult to feel gratitude toward a creature whose species only recently learned to leave their own planet." Deho pulled a chair beside her bed and sat down without responding to her insults. He had dealt with worse attitudes during his years of service, and he understood that her anger came from fear and humiliation rather than genuine hatred. The physicians say I need to maintain physical contact with you for extended periods, he said calmly. I suggest we begin with something simple. He extended his hand toward her, palm up, waiting for her to make the choice. Forcing contact upon her would accomplish nothing except deepening her resentment. And Deho believed that healing required cooperation rather than coercion. Salith stared at his hand like it was something disgusting. You expect me to hold hands with you like some romantic fool from a primitive entertainment broadcast. I expect nothing, Deho replied. I am offering. You can accept or refuse as you choose, but your mother asked me to help you, and I intend to honor that request regardless of how you feel about me personally. Several minutes passed in tense silence before Salith finally reached out and placed her hand in his. Her skin felt cool and smooth, like polished stone. And Deho noticed that she trembled slightly at the contact. Tell me about your world, Salith demanded suddenly. If I must endure this indignity, then you should at least provide entertainment to distract me from it. Deho smiled slightly and began to speak about Earth. He told her about the mountains of his homeland in Korea, where ancient temples perched on cliff faces and morning mist filled the valleys like rivers of cloud. He described the seasons that transformed the landscape from winter white to spring green to autumn gold. Salith listened with reluctant interest as he spoke about human history, the wars and famines and plagues that had shaped his species into survivors. He told her about his grandmother, a woman who had lived through conflict and hardship, yet never lost her capacity for kindness and laughter. Your people have suffered greatly, Salith observed after hours of conversation. Yet you speak of these tragedies without bitterness. How is that possible? Because suffering taught us to treasure what we have, Deho explained. We live short lives compared to most galactic species, so we learn to find meaning in small moments rather than waiting for grand ones. A meal shared with family, a sunrise watched with someone we love, a child's laughter, these things matter more to us than conquest or glory. Days turned into weeks as the treatment continued. Salith's condition improved steadily, with color returning to her skin and strength flowing back into her limbs. By the third week, she could sit up without assistance, and by the fifth, she took her first steps in years. The transformation in her attitude matched the transformation in her body. The hostile princes who had called him primitive gradually became curious, then friendly, then something approaching genuine warmth. You never complained, Salith said one evening as they sat together watching stars through the viewport. Not when I insulted you, not when the guards treated you like a prisoner, not when my people looked at you with disgust. Why do you endure such treatment without protest? Deho considered the question carefully before answering. Because I understand that fear makes people cruel, he said. Your people fear what they do not understand, and humans are very new to this galaxy. Proving ourselves worthy of respect through patience and compassion will accomplish more than demanding respect through anger. Salith turned to look at him with an expression he had not seen before, something soft and wondering that made her luminescent skin glow brighter. You are nothing like what I was taught about humans, she admitted. My tutors described your species as violent and primitive, barely evolved beyond animals. They never mentioned that you could be kind or wise or gentle. Perhaps your tutors never met a human, Deho suggested. It is easy to believe terrible things about people you have never known. Much harder to maintain those beliefs after sharing meals and conversations and laughter. Salith squeezed his hand, and Deho felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the healing process. He knew that their relationship had evolved into something neither of them had expected, a genuine friendship that crossed the boundaries of species and culture. Thank you, Salith whispered, not just for healing my body, but for showing me that my understanding of the universe was incomplete. You have given me a gift greater than health, Before Daiho could respond, alarms began shrieking throughout the station. Guards burst into the room with weapons drawn, and the Queen's voice crackled through the communication system with urgent commands. Assassination attempt detected. A guard announced grimly, "Someone has breached the medical wing. They are coming for the human." Daiho rose to his feet and positioned himself between Salith and the door, prepared to face whatever threat had come to destroy the miracle that the galaxy now knew about. The news had spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grassland. Humans possessed the ability to heal other species through touch. And suddenly the primitive, newcomers from the Category 5 Death World, had become the most valuable resource in Nome. Space Daiho had not fully understood the implications until he saw the intelligence reports that the Queen shared with him. Dozens of factions were already mobilizing to secure access to human healing abilities, and their methods range from diplomatic overtures to outright kidnapping and experimentation. The Kathrani Collective has proposed purchasing human citizens from your government, Queen Valtherus explained during a briefing session. The Morthax Empire has suggested establishing breeding colonies to produce more humans. The Syndicate of Shadows has already dispatched agents to Earth to abduct subjects for study. Daiho felt sick as he listened to these reports. His people had become commodities in the eyes of the galaxy, valuable not for their minds or their culture, but for the biological accident that made their touch therapeutic. "And the assassins?" he asked. "Who sent them?" "The Valorian Dominion," the Queen replied grimly. "They cannot afford to let the Velisari Empire gain exclusive access to human healing. Eliminating you would slow our advantage and buy them time to secure their own human assets." Salith stood beside Daiho with her hand resting on his arm, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. Her recovery had continued remarkably, and she now moved with almost the full grace of a healthy Velisari. "We must protect him," Salith declared. "Not just for my sake, but because he represents the best of his species. If the galaxy sees humans as resources to be exploited rather than people to be respected, we will have failed a moral test that will shame us forever." The Queen studied her daughter with evident surprise. The princess, who had once dismissed humans as primitives, now stood as their defender. And the transformation clearly pleased her mother. "I have increased security significantly," the Queen assured them. "But the Dominion is persistent and their agents are skilled. We must remain vigilant." 3 days later, the assassin struck. Daiho was walking through the medical wing when the attack began. Energy blasts tore through the corridor as figures in black armor emerged from hidden positions. Their weapons focused entirely on him. He dove behind a support column as plasma fire scorched the air where he had stood. His military training kicked in automatically, analyzing angles and escape routes while his body moved through defensive maneuvers. But there were too many attackers, and they had positioned themselves to cut off every path of retreat. Daiho realized with cold clarity that he was going to die in this corridor. Killed not for anything he had done wrong, but simply because he existed. Then Salith appeared. She strode into the corridor with royal guards flanking her. But she did not stay behind their protective formation. Instead, she walked directly toward Daiho, placing her own body between him and the assassins. "Fire upon me if you dare," she shouted at the attackers. "I am Princess Selith of the Velisari Empire, and any harm done to me will be considered an act of war against my entire civilization." The assassins hesitated. Killing a human was one thing, but killing Velisari royalty would trigger consequences that even the Valorian Dominion could not afford. In that moment of hesitation, the royal guard struck. They had used Salith's distraction to flank the assassins, and within seconds, the attack had been neutralized with brutal efficiency. But not before one assassin fired a final desperate shot. Daiho saw the energy blast coming and knew he could not dodge it. He twisted to minimize the damage, taking the shot in his side rather than his chest, and collapsed to the floor as pain exploded through his body. Silith screamed and fell to her knees beside him, her hands pressing against the wound that was spreading crimson across his uniform. Her luminescent skin flickered with distress as she called for medical assistance. "Stay with me," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "You cannot die. Not after everything you have done. Not after everything you have shown me about what the universe could be." Deho tried to speak but found that his voice would not obey him. The pain was overwhelming, and he felt consciousness slipping away like sand through fingers. Human physiology cannot repair damage of this severity, a physician announced grimly as the medical team arrived. His species can heal others, but they cannot heal themselves. Without intervention, he will die within hours. Queen Valtherus arrived at the scene and surveyed the situation with her characteristic composure. But Deho could see something different in her eyes, not just political calculation, but genuine concern for the man who had saved her daughter. "Use every resource at our disposal," the Queen commanded. "Bring specialists from across the Empire if necessary. This man will not die on my station. Do you understand me?" The medical team lifted Deho onto a platform and rushed him towards surgery. His vision was fading, but the last thing he saw was Salith running alongside him, her hand gripping his, as if she could anchor him to life through sheer determination. "Fight," she whispered fiercely. "Fight like your ancestors fought, like your grandmother fought. Show the galaxy that humans do not surrender, that you never stop struggling, even when everything seems lost." Deho tried to hold on to her voice as darkness claimed him, carrying it like a torch into the void that waited to swallow him whole. Deho woke to soft light and the gentle hum of medical equipment. He blinked several times, trying to understand why he was still alive when he clearly remembered dying in that corridor. Ah, the miracle worker finally awakens. He turned his head to find Salith sitting beside his bed, her fully healed skin glowing with vibrant colors that shifted like auroras dancing across a night sky. She looked healthy and strong and beautiful in a way that transcended the differences between their species. "How long?" Deho managed to croak through a throat that felt like sandpaper. 12 days. Salith replied, her voice carrying both relief and lingering worry. "The physicians had to reconstruct most of your internal organs. Velisari medical technology is quite advanced, but even our best surgeons were challenged by the complexity of human biology." She reached out and took his hand, and Deho noticed that she no longer hesitated before touching him. The contact felt natural now, comfortable in a way that would have seemed impossible during their first meeting. "My mother declared you a hero of the Empire," Salith continued with a slight smile. "There was a rather elaborate ceremony while you were unconscious. I accepted the honors on your behalf, though I suspect you would have been embarrassed by all the attention." Deho tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through his side, reminding him that even advanced alien medicine could not completely erase the damage from an assassination attempt. "Rest," Salith commanded gently. "You have earned it, and there is much to tell you once you are strong enough to hear it." Over the following days, Deho learned how significantly the galaxy had changed while he lay healing. Assassination attempt had backfired spectacularly on the Valorian Dominion. Footage of Princess Salith shielding a human with her own body had spread across every communication network, and the image had transformed perceptions of both the princess and the species she had protected. "They call it the embrace of harmony," Salith explained with obvious amusement. "Poets have written verses about it, artists have created sculptures, and philosophers have used it as an example of cross-species connection, overcoming ancient prejudices. More importantly, the incident had sparked serious discussions about human rights in the Galactic Assembly. Multiple species had been horrified by the revelation that factions were planning to treat humans as resources rather than people. and a coalition had formed to establish protections, Queen. Valtherus had led this coalition with unexpected passion. Humanity saved my daughter, when my entire empire could not, the Queen declared in an address that Salith played for Deho. They did this not through superior technology or military force, but through simple compassion. They offered help without demanding payment, comfort without requiring submission. If we respond to such gifts by enslaving and exploiting their species, we prove ourselves unworthy of the civilization we claim to represent. The Assembly voted to grant humans full membership rather than mere observer status. They also passed strict regulations prohibiting the capture, purchase, or exploitation of human beings for any purpose. Your people are now protected by galactic law, Salith announced proudly. It is not perfect protection, but it establishes a foundation that can be strengthened over time. When Deho was finally strong enough to leave the medical bay, he found a delegation waiting for him. Queen Valtherus stood at the center, surrounded by advisors and nobles who watched him with expressions ranging from curiosity to genuine respect. Sergeant Khan Deho, the Queen announced formally, you have served the Velisari Empire with honor and courage. In recognition of your service, I offer you a position as royal healer with estates, titles, and privileges befitting your station. It was an offer that most beings in the galaxy would have accepted without hesitation. The wealth and status being presented would have transformed Deho into one of the most powerful humans in existence. Your Majesty, Deho replied carefully, I am deeply honored by your generosity, and I do not wish to seem ungrateful for everything you have done. But I am a soldier, not a noble, and my place is with my people rather than in a palace. The Queen studied him for a long moment, and then nodded with what appeared to be satisfaction rather than disappointment. I expected this answer, she admitted. It confirms what my daughter has told me about human character. You seek purpose rather than comfort, service rather than reward. She gestured, and an attendant brought forward a small case. Then accept this instead, the Queen continued. A communication device linked directly to the royal household. If you or your people ever require assistance, you need only ask, and the resources of the Velisari Empire will answer. Deho accepted the gift with a formal bow that he had practiced during his recovery. Some traditions were worth respecting, even for a soldier who rejected titles and estates. Later that evening, Salith found him in the observation deck where their friendship had truly begun. She stood beside him as they watched stars wheel slowly past the viewport, close enough that their shoulders touched. Will you return to Earth? She asked quietly. Eventually, Deho replied, but first I will return to my post. Station Harmony still needs security officers, and I have learned that being present at the right moment can sometimes change the universe. Salith smiled at this, and Deho noticed that her smile had become one of his favorite sights in all the galaxy. I will advocate for humanity in the Assembly, she said. I will ensure that your species receives the respect and opportunities you deserve. This I promise you, not as a princess but as a friend. Deho turned to face her, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Words seemed inadequate for what had grown between them. This connection that had begun with an accident and evolved into something neither had expected. Thank you, Deho finally said, for shielding me when I could not shield myself, for fighting for my people when we had no voice, for seeing past the differences between us to the common ground beneath. Salith reached out and took his hand one final time, her luminescent skin warm against his ordinary human flesh. Thank you for catching me when I was falling, she replied. Everything else followed from that single moment of compassion. Deho returned to his post the next morning, standing in the medical wing corridor where everything had begun. The station continued its endless dance of diplomacy and negotiation. But something fundamental had shifted in the way other species looked at humans. They had earned their place among the stars, not through conquest or technology, but through the simple truth that sometimes reaching out to help someone in need can change the universe forever.